Have you ever noticed how much food is in the Bible? It's quite a lot. Food is on the trees in the creation story. It's categorized in the rules that set Israel apart from other nations. It's in the letters of Paul talking about how the early church eats together. And it's dreamed about in Acts to demonstrate that Gentiles can now become Christian. If you start looking, food is everywhere in the Bible, including in the Gospels. There's something so basic and central to our lives about eating that these stories make space for relatability and meaning and even drama. Maybe that's part of the reason that this narrative is so important. The feeding of the 5,000 is the only miracle recorded in all four Gospels, and there's something about it that's foundational to how we understand Jesus. At the beginning of this story, Jesus is grieving, and all he wants is to be alone. He's just lost his cousin, John the Baptist, to Herod's birthday party gone horribly wrong, and we see Jesus acting very human. Reeling from grief for a family member, he takes a boat out on the lake by himself to sort through it all a little. But when he comes ashore, there are the crowds. And then we see Jesus acting very divine. He is deeply moved with compassion, even in the midst of his grief. So he heals and then feeds these strangers, using only the little bit of food provided. Jesus really didn't need to feed anyone that evening. Miraculous healings would have been enough. So his disciples very sensibly suggest that he dismiss the crowd around dinner time. But Jesus instead keeps them there, proceeds to feed them, and then immediately dismisses them anyway at the beginning of the next chapter. He didn't want to keep them from going home. He just didn't want them to go home hungry. This story makes me love Jesus a little more for his humanity and his divinity, and his complete failure to see why a lack of food should mean that anyone had to leave hungry. Those 5,000 men and all of the uncounted women and all of the uncounted children all ate until they were satisfied and had leftovers. Eating until you were full was probably not an everyday occurrence for many of the people in this crowd. Food shortages were common, especially for the everyday people that Jesus ministered to. One commentary I saw suggested that many of the illnesses that Jesus had just healed before dinner were caused by malnutrition in the first place. So in a way, food was healing, and a free, satisfying dinner was grace. The crowds didn't expect to get dinner either. They wanted to see Jesus and had to go in a hurry to find him. There was no time to bring food. I think that if I had been in the crowd, I would have been happy to have caught Jesus, but I would have been checking the time a little bit too, figuring out whether it might be possible to buy food on the way home. Or, more likely, worried about having to go home in the dark and short of cash, I would have just resolved to go without dinner. That's likely where most people were at when Jesus tells everyone, orders them actually, to sit down on the grass. In terms that we hear as strongly Eucharistic, Jesus blesses the bread, breaks it, and gives it to the people, so there is enough for all. In some ways, it's not even the miracle that's so striking about this story. It's the simple act of Jesus suddenly deciding to feed everyone. I think that's why we call it the feeding of the 5,000, not the miracle of the multiplication or that big picnic that Jesus held that time. What matters to us about this story is that everybody gets fed. Think about the people in your life that feed you. What does that mean for your relationship? My best friend has a bumper sticker on her fridge that reads, "Love people, cook them tasty food." And she does. Over the past decades, she has cooked me countless meals, embodying care, generosity, and hospitality. I've been thinking this week of her summertime bread and tomato salad, which is divine, and I could eat an entire mixing bowl full of. I know that her food is an expression of affection. Would I know that she loved me if she didn't cook for me? Of course. But at those meals, I know it simply and directly in a completely different way than being told. Similarly, it's often hard for me to understand what Christ's death and resurrection have to do with me exactly when I hear about them in words. But I know what it means to be fed. And so, especially on those days when I don't feel certain of what Jesus means in my life or how I'm going to get through, I need communion. The creed might tell me that it was for us and for our salvation that Jesus was crucified, but at the communion table, I know it for myself. To be given Christ's body to eat is to accept a far deeper connection with Jesus than any words could express. It's a scandalous amount of grace to receive, a grace we get to taste. I think we love this story of the feeding of the 5,000 because everyone there tasted grace that day. Those people expected to go home hungry. As the disciples oh so helpfully point out to Jesus, they're in a deserted place. There's nothing there except the meal or two that someone thought to pack. Definitely not enough for everyone. And I wonder if Jesus was amused by that very human line of reasoning. After all, there was that whole 40 years of manna from heaven back in Exodus. God has provided bread in the wilderness before. So if there could be bread in that wilderness, then why not this one? And like the disciples thought that manna all those years ago didn't affect their lives, do we think that this story doesn't affect ours? We're still so quick to think that there won't be enough to go around, or that God might have provided in the wilderness then, but surely not now. We all have wildernesses in our lives, even when things are going well. There's always some corner that we think, surely there couldn't be bread there. We're practical, like the disciples, and we know when there's nothing nourishing around. But God has provided bread in the wilderness before. If there could be bread in that wilderness, then why not in this one? And not just some bread, not just what you or I remembered to bring, but more than we could possibly need. We share a lot of bread here at Grace and Holy. This past Friday at Red Door, we served spaghetti and meatballs with big, fluffy pieces of garlic bread, and also handed out those fancy, crusted, day-old loaves from Can Brasserie if someone wanted to take even more bread to go. People today are struggling with hunger and in need of bread, just as they were in Jesus' day. And like what Jesus did, Red Door's ministry, creating space for people to sit down and eat their fill, is about more than literal hunger. It's about dignity, community, and checking in on each other's lives. We also share bread and meaning with one another in the Eucharist. Every time I get to share communion with you in your home or a care center room or here around our altar table, that is God showing up for the both of us. Sometimes we don't know how hungry for grace we are until we are once again fed by God. Even in the places that look most unlikely, God has a habit of providing bread in the wilderness, of taking scarcity and turning it into abundance. Often we look for so little grace when there is so much. Jesus provided so much food in the desert that day, and Jesus will continue to provide food for us, even when we think we will go hungry, sometimes especially when we think we will go hungry. It's then that we're surprised by the bread of grace, the food of community, the food of Jesus' own body, and let's not forget literal, delicious, life-giving food. Again today, Jesus will not send us away from this place or from his presence without giving us something to eat. With God, there has been abundant bread in the wilderness, and there will continue to be, more than we ever expect. Thanks be to God.